Ni hao! Today we're making a review on the book of Kenneth Pletcher, The History of China.
This book describes the evolution of the development of such a great Asian country as China.
We will discuss the plot of the book and mention some interesting and fascinating facts from it.
To start with, dynastic cycles is an important political theory in Chinese history. According to the theory, every dynasty goes through a culture cycle. Let's consider its concept in details. A ruler unites China, founds a new dynasty, and gains mandate of heaven, validation of his ability to rule the country.
China, under the rule of new dynasty, achieves prosperity.
Corruption becomes rampant in the imperial court, and the emperor begins to enter decline and instability. A natural disaster wipes out the farmland, the famine causes the population to rebel, and civil war ensues.
The ruler loses his mandate of heaven, and after that, people overthrow him.
China goes through the period of warring states.
And then one state remains victorious.
The new ruler occurs, and the cycle repeats itself.
Chinese people think that the history of their country has a length more than 5,000 years, but the exact length of it is open to the interpretation. But the earliest archaeological records from what is called the Shang dynasty, bronze vessels, jade articles, and pottery have been discovered dating from as early as 1600 BC.
After the Shang dynasty came Zhou dynasty, when the realm was ruled over by kings through a network of feudal states. This whole period can also be divided up into the Western and Eastern Zhou periods. The first part of the Zhou dynasty was peaceful, but after 476 before Christ, we had what is called the Warring States period. 7 prominent states emerged, and there was a huge rivalry between them.
Also, during this period, there was a number of influential Chinese thinkers, such as Confucius. Eventually, of the hundreds of years of battles, the states of Qin and Chu rose above other states, and in the end, it was the state of Qin that took the power and established China's first dynasty.
The Qin dynasty was ruled over by the first Chinese emperor. He centralized the power of the state, created a system of laws, standardized units of weight and management across its territory, and he also standardized the writing system. They weren't quite the Chinese characters we know today, but they were related. The first emperor imposed heavy taxes and started a lot of construction projects, including the first Great Wall.
The Qin dynasty was very short, and the first emperor died in 210 before Christ. The Qin dynasty was very short, and the first emperor died in 210 before Christ. He was buried in a vast tomb in what is now the city of Xi'an. He is famous for being buried with a huge army of 6,000 terracotta statues of warriors. After the Qin dynasty, a person called Liao Bong led a revolt and founded the Han dynasty.
The Han, the next great imperial dynasty, founded much of Chinese culture. Under the leadership of its most famous emperor Han Wudi, China defeated the northern nomadic neighbors and took control over the eastern part of the Great Silk Road, which allowed this country to expand its trade to Rome. Emperor was also the founder of Chinese service system, in which young people competed through examinations for public office.
Unfortunately, the Han dynasty fell, and China entered the period of the fractured state known as the period of 6 dynasties. Even though the country was disunited, the unique Chinese character retained. This era was a time of development of China's 3 major religions: Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism.
Under the quick reign of Sui dynasty, the country was unified after more than 3 centuries of fragmentation. The most vivid impact of the Sui dynasty on the development of China was building a great waterway, the Bian Canal, which linked North and South China.
Speaking about interesting facts, women had low status during the Chinese feudal period. One of the most famous women of Chinese history was Wu Hou, the only female emperor. She ruled during the Tang Dynasty and initially was a low-ranking concubine. She came to power because of her skill in intrigue and cunning. Wu Hou was obsessed with religion and symbolism.
After the Sui dynasty, King Tang dynasty was established the basic constitution of the Tang state, which influenced not only rapid development of Chinese society, but also the occurrence of the first centralized states in societies.
Then another period of instability came into place, during which three northern people, the Tangut, Khitan, and Juchen, occupied parts of China's traditional territories. The Juchen overthrew others and led to the appearance of the Song dynasty. And the Song dynasty was one of the most brilliant dynasties in Chinese history. And during the Song period, trade increased, literature printing became widespread, and a great number of people now was able to receive education. Happened the agricultural revolution. China became the largest population in the world at that time. Nevertheless, there was a spiritual crisis that led to a new form of Confucianism known as Li Xue, School of Universal Principles.
In the late 12th and 13th century, Mongolian warriors conquered China and started the Yang dynasty. It was difficult for native Chinese to be ruled by a foreign invader. They were not allowed to hold the highest position in court and were called Thousand Barbarians. However, because the empire was so vast, China engaged in more extensive foreign trade than ever before, allowing the country to become richer and more stable. Chinese rulers reclaimed leadership of the country during the Ming Dynasty.
China has had a huge cultural and political influence on East Asia.
This era was especially famous for its brilliant art.
During the Qing dynasty, there was greatly developed trade with other countries because a country had a favorable trade balance, but gradually it became weak and starting in 1820s, European powers such as Great Britain began to demand concessions and other special goods from China.
One of the most destroying and harmful events in China's history was definitely the Opium Wars. The Opium Wars were the two conflicts fought in China in the mid-19th century between the forces of Western countries and the Qin dynasty, which ruled China from 1644 to 1911. The first Opium War was fought between China and Great Britain, and the Second Opium War, also known as the Arrow War and Anglo-French War in China, was fought by Great Britain and France against China.
The First Opium War exposed the military weakness of China despite her enormous economy and advanced society. This created a huge opportunity for the British to exploit China by forcing more trading ports, more opium penetration into the inland regions. The Second Opium War basically cracked open the whole China for other European powers to exploit it. The consequences included the burn down of the Summer Palace, numerous unequal treaties, and forced lease of strategic places like Shanghai.
The Qin dynasty was in crisis, and there were attempts at reforms. The rising reformer Sun Yat-sen focused on trying to find a solution to revive China. But after the Xinhai Revolution, the Republic of China was established under Sun Yat-sen and then was ruled over by Yun Shike. But there was no strong government to rule over the country, so attempts to establish a parliament under the constitution failed, and China fell into the power of warlords, and during this period, the Nationalist Party was struggling to keep control of the country. The Communist Party was founded in 1920, and in 1925, Chiang Kai-shek became leader of the Nationalist Party in charge, and then in 1931, Japan invaded northeast China, the area called Manchuria. In December 1936, the Nationalist and Communist parties agreed to unite together to fight the Japanese.
The Japanese stepped up their invasion in China in 1937, savaging the country and committing large-scale war crimes such as massacre and rape. In 1940 and 1941, the alliance between nationalists and communists really started to break down, and the two sides were already engaged in full-scale civil war between them for the control of the country. World War II ended in 1945, and the Communist Party had seized control of China and declared the People's Republic of China. October the 1st, 1941, the nationalists were treated with their troops to the island of Taiwan, and since 1949, the Communist Party has ruled China as an authoritarian one-party state, and Mao Zedong sought to make China into a socialist state using a modified Marxist-Leninist system. He carried out land reform, and during his Great Leap Forward campaign, he collectivized the country, which means he put it under the collective control, and he also called for industrialization of the country.
Unfortunately, during the industrialization, a large part of the agricultural labor force was taken away, which caused huge food shortages. During Mao's Cultural Revolution, the regime purged a number of people who disagreed with the rule, and there was widespread chaos and looting by Mao's supporters, the Red Guards. The violence and chaos completely disrupted infrastructure. After Mao, there was a short power struggle, and China has been led since then by Deng Xiaoping, who reformed the country and opened up the economy to the outside world in 1980s, and he began China's meteoric economic growth.
In the end, we would like to say that we all really liked that book.
It was a great opportunity for us to learn more about such an influential country in nowadays world.
It was also very beneficial for us to understand the culture and traditions of China. Thank you for your attention.
再见。